So this deep dive is brought to you by Cert Fuel. They've got a full Securities Industry Essentials course with adaptive study quizzes, smart flashcards, and unlimited practice exams that are actually weighted, just like the real thing. You can check it out at certfuel.com.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Okay, so I want you to picture this. Imagine you're at a backyard barbecue. It's a, beautiful Saturday afternoon.
Seems nice.
Right. You've got a cold beer in your hand, you're flipping burgers, and you casually lean over the fence and tell your neighbor a little secret about your tech company's upcoming product launch.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Nothing malicious, just like making conversation. But come Monday morning, federal agents are kicking down your door, they're freezing your bank accounts, and handing you a $5 million fine.
Yeah, that escalated quickly.
I mean, you didn't steal a single dime from anyone's pocket, but you just ruined your life, and you were looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary.
It sounds like a Hollywood script, but honestly, in the securities industry, that scenario plays out way more often than people realize.
Which is wild.
It is. The boundary between a casual conversation and a federal crime is just, it's razor thin if you don't know exactly where the lines are drawn.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are talking about the absolute highest stakes in finance. For those of you listening who are studying for the SIE exam, you already know we are covering prohibited activities.
Right.
But we are not going to just read you a dry list of regulations because that is the quickest way to fall asleep.
Oh, absolutely. Prohibited activities, along with trading and accounts, makes up 31% of your entire SIE exam.
31%.
It's massive. It is the single largest hurdle standing between you and your career. So our mission today is to really decode the architecture of these rules.
And figure out the why.
Exactly. We are going to explore the underlying mechanisms of financial crime, like the exact reasons why regulators wrote these rules in the first place, and how they actually catch people breaking them today.
Because once you understand the logic, the why behind a regulation, you stop just blindly memorizing. You start anticipating.
Right. And more importantly, you will be able to spot the exam traps before you even finish reading the question.
Which is the goal. So let's build a framework that you can apply under pressure. So with the absolute foundation. Before someone can break the rules of the game, we have to establish who is legally allowed on the field.
Registration.
Right.
The entire regulatory apparatus of the U.S. financial system basically rests on one concept, which is the gatekeeper. And registration is that gatekeeper.
Okay, so what's the core rule there?
The core rule is that a brokerage firm cannot pay commissions or really any form of transaction-based compensation to an unregistered person.
So it's an absolute barrier.
Complete barrier. Unregistered persons cannot solicit customers, they cannot take orders, and they definitely cannot execute transactions.
Okay, we all know that baseline rule, right? But the exam isn't going to ask a simple true or false question. It's going to test the gray areas.
Always.
So let's bring in a character to help us navigate this. Let's introduce receptionist Rachel.
Okay, Rachel.
Yeah. Rachel is the MVP of the brokerage firm. She handles the phones, greets the high net worth clients, organizes the calendar. I mean, everyone loves her.
But she's unregistered.
Exactly. No SIE, no Series 7. So if a client walks in and asks, hey, Rachel, do you guys sell mutual funds? What is her exact legal boundary?
Well, Rachel is allowed to provide general factual information, so she can say, yes, our firm offers a wide variety of mutual funds, equities, and fixed income products. Let me get a registered representative to sit down with you.
Okay, so she is acting purely as an informational directory.
Right, which is perfectly legal.
Okay, but let's say the client leans on the desk and says, look, Rachel, you've worked here a long time. My son is heading to college in 10 years. Which of these mutual funds is actually the best?
Okay.
If Rachel says, oh, you should definitely look at our large cap growth fund, all our smart clients are buying it. I mean, she just crossed the line, right?
She absolutely crossed the line, and she honestly just dragged the entire firm into a massive compliance nightmare.
Just from that one comment.
Yes, because by suggesting a specific product and tailoring it to the client's timeline, the 10 years to college, Rachel just made a recommendation.
Right.
And in the eyes of regulators, making a recommendation or even discussing suitability constitutes solicitation.
And solicitation is guarded.
Very heavily guarded. It's a protected activity strictly reserved for individuals who have passed rigorous background checks and competency exams.
Okay, let me push back on this a bit because this is where my brain always gets stuck on the actual mechanics of it.
Go for it.
Let's say a client doesn't ask for advice at all. Like they are an aggressive day trader. They know exactly what they want. They walk up to Rachel's desk, hand her a slip of paper and say, I want to buy 100 shares of Apple stock at the current market price.
Okay.
Rachel doesn't give a single piece of advice. She just turns around, types the exact ticker symbol and quantity into the firm's trading terminal, and hits the enter key. She's essentially just acting as keyboard. Why is that illegal?
That is a phenomenal question, and it gets to the heart of what the market actually is. Hitting that enter key isn't just data entry, it is the literal execution of a transaction.
Oh, because it hits the exchange.
Exactly. When that order hits the exchange, it creates a legally binding financial contract in the open market. Regulators demand that the human being pushing that button is legally accountable.
Yeah, it makes sense.
They have to be heavily supervised and licensed to interact with the market infrastructure. So if Rachel pushes the button, she is acting in a registered capacity without a license. It doesn't matter that she was just being a helpful conduit.
Wow. Okay, so when you frame it as a binding contract, that makes total sense. The SEC doesn't care about her intentions.
Not at all.
They just care about who holds the liability for the trade.
Precisely. And I want to explicitly call out an exam trap here for everyone listening.
Yes, please. Trap alert.
This is where the test tries to get you. They will present a scenario where a registered broker is stuck in traffic, and he calls his unregistered assistant, Rachel, and says, hey, just enter this one trade for my biggest client. It's an emergency.
And people think it's okay because the broker okayed it.
Right. The trap is thinking that because she works inside the physical walls of a brokerage firm, and because she has the broker's direct permission, she can touch the trade.
But she can't.
She absolutely cannot. The location doesn't matter. The permission doesn't matter. The violation is based purely on the action.
The action, not the location. If you touch the trade, you need a license. Period.
Period.
Okay, so I want to pose a direct question to you, the listener.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can logic your way through a chronological twist on this exact rule. Listen closely and just think about it for a beat. Let's introduce a new character. Let's bring in retired rep Randy.
Oh, a classic industry scenario.
Exactly. So Randy has been a licensed registered broker for 30 years. He finally decides he's done. He retires, lets all his FINRA licenses officially lapse, and move down to Boca Raton to play golf full-time.
Good for Randy.
Right. He is 100% unregistered today. So here is the question. Can Randy still receive 12B1 trailing fees, which are ongoing commission payouts from mutual funds that he sold to his clients 5 years ago? I'll give you a second. Does Randy get the money?
And the answer is yes. Randy gets to cash those checks.
Now, wait a minute. You just established very firmly that a firm cannot pay commissions to an unregistered person. Randy does not have a license anymore. How is this not a massive violation?
I know it sounds like a contradiction, but it comes down to when the business was originated.
Okay.
Trailing commissions or continuing commissions are legally permissible for retired reps because those payments are directly compensating Randy for business he originated while he was still fully legally registered.
So it's about the origin of the contract.
Exactly. When we talk about 12B1 fees, which, as a quick refresher, are the ongoing marketing and distribution fees that a mutual fund charges its investors, those fees are paid out to the broker of record over the life of the investment.
Right.
So Randy's receipt of those fees in retirement is just a contractual payout for his past compliant work.
But there has to be a catch, right? I mean, he can't just operate like a shadow broker from the golf course.
No, absolutely not. The strict regulatory condition is that Randy cannot solicit any new business, he cannot open any new accounts, and he cannot actively service those old accounts.
So if a client calls him while he's putting...
If a former client calls him on the golf course and asks if they should sell the fund, Randy has to say, I am retired and unregistered. You need to call the active broker at the firm.
Okay, so he can collect the residual income from his past efforts, but zero current securities business.
Spot on.
So the exam here is pretty simple. Look at the timeline. If the compensation is tied to a new transaction or ongoing advice, they must be registered today. But if it's a trailing fee from a legally compliant sale made years ago, Randy is in the clear.
Exactly.
Okay, we've established who is legally allowed to sit at the table. Now, let's look at what happens when the people sitting at the table decide they don't like the odds and try to artificially rig the game. We are moving from the gatekeepers to the catch-all nets of anti-fraud and market manipulation.
And market manipulation is one of the most aggressively prosecuted areas in finance.
I bet.
The defining characteristic of manipulation is intentional conduct designed to deceive investors by artificially influencing the price or the trading volume of a security.
The operative word there being artificially.
Exactly. In a healthy market, authentic supply and authentic demand determine the price of an asset. The moment a participant steps in to fabricate supply or fabricate demand, they are undermining the entire economic system.
And to catch these manipulators, regulators basically rely on three massive legal nets, right? We have SEC Rule 10b-5, we have Section 9A2 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, and we have FINRA Rule 2020.
That's the trio.
I want to start with SEC Rule 10b-5, because the way I look at it, 10b-5 is sort of like the duct tape of American securities law.
The duct tape, I like that.
Yeah, because it fixes everything. Or, more accurately, it catches everything. Like, it doesn't matter how clever or novel a financial crime is, if you use a security to lie to somebody, 10b-5 will stick to you. It is incredibly broad.
It really is the ultimate catch-all. The actual text of Rule 10b-5 is surprisingly short, but it has generated mountains of case law over the decades.
Because it covers so much.
It applies to virtually any fraud, omission of material fact, or deceit in connection with the purchase or sale of any security. If you are taking the SIE and a question asks which rule broadly prohibits fraudulent, deceptive, or manipulative conduct, and 10b-5 is an option, it is almost certainly the right answer.
But the SEC can't just throw 10b-5 at somebody who made, like, an honest math error, right? There is a specific legal hurdle they have to clear.
Yes, and that hurdle is called scienter, S-C-I-E-N-T-E-R. It's a legal term that means intent. To prove a 10b-5 violation, the regulators must prove that the individual acted with scienter, meaning they intended to deceive, manipulate, or defraud, or they acted with extreme, reckless disregard for the truth.
Okay, so an innocent clerical error is not a 10b-5 violation.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the duct tape. Now let's contrast that with Section 9A2 of the Exchange Act. If 10b-5 is duct tape, Section 9A2 is like a highly specialized laser scalpel.
That's a really great way to distinguish them. Section 9A2 doesn't just look at broad fraud. It specifically targets the physical mechanics of trading.
Like what?
It prohibits transactions that create a false or misleading appearance of active trading in a security, or transactions designed to artificially raise or depress the price of a security, specifically to induce others to buy or sell.
Got it. And then we have the third net, FINRA Rule 2020. My understanding is that Rule 2020 essentially mirrors the language of 10b-5, but it's a jurisdictional boundary. Like, SEC Rule 10b-5 applies to literally anyone in the world touching U.S. markets. You, me, a CEO, a hedge fund manager. But FINRA Rule 2020 applies specifically and exclusively to FINRA member firms and their associated registered reps.
Right. It gives FINRA the direct authority to discipline its own members for manipulative conduct without having to wait for the SEC to build a huge federal case.
That makes sense. Let's bring these rules to life, though. We need a villain. Let's introduce Broker Bob.
Uh-oh. Broker Bob?
Yeah, Bob is registered. He works at a Monterey member firm, but he is fundamentally greedy. He drives a leased sports car he can barely afford, and he's always looking for an angle. Let's walk through Bob's first scheme, the classic pump and dump.
Okay, the pump and dump is perhaps the most famous or really infamous form of market manipulation out there. It usually targets microcap or penny stocks because their low trading volume makes them incredibly easy to manipulate.
So how does Bob set it up?
Let's say Broker Bob finds a defunct company that trades over the counter for like 2 cents a share. The company literally does nothing. Bob quietly accumulates a massive personal position in this garbage stock. Say he buys 1 million shares for $20,000.
So Bob is holding the bag at 2 cents. Now comes the pump.
Right. Bob activates his network. He starts calling his most gullible clients. He sends out mass emails. He might even hire promoters to blast message boards and social media.
Making up news.
Exactly. He spreads aggressively false information, claiming this company just secured a massive government contract or they just discovered a cure for a rare disease.
Right, like this stock is going to $10 by Friday. Get in now.
Yeah.
And because Bob is hyping it up, his clients trust him. They start buying. Retail investors see the chatter online and they start buying.
And here is where we look at the mechanics of the market. Because the stock has such low liquidity, this sudden influx of artificial demand from retail buyers completely overwhelms the limited supply.
Which means the price has to move.
Exactly. The clearinghouses process these buy orders, the market makers adjust their quotes, and the price skyrockets. It goes from 2 cents to 50 cents in a matter of hours.
Wow. So the public is buying, thinking it's going to the moon. And that is exactly when Bob executes the dump.
Precisely. While the artificial demand is at its absolute peak, Bob quietly sells his entire million-share personal position into the market at 50 cents.
Cash out.
He cashes out a massive profit, and the very moment Bob stops promoting the stock, the moment the artificial demand evaporates, the reality of the worthless company sets in.
The price collapses back down to 2 cents, and all of Bob's clients lose 90% of their money.
Yep.
Now, in the critique of our early outlines, listeners specifically asked us to ground this stuff in reality. The mechanics you just described, the quiet accumulation, the aggressive boiler room hype, the devastating dump that is the exact playbook used by Jordan Belfort and Stratton Oakmont in the 1990s, right?
Oh, it is the textbook Stratton Oakmont model. Belfort's firm would secure control of the float, meaning the available shares of a newly public microcap company. They effectively choked the supply.
Right.
Then they used an army of aggressive brokers in a boiler room setting to hammer retail investors with high-pressure sales pitches, creating massive artificial demand.
And then dumped it.
When the price peaked, the insiders dumped their shares, enriching themselves and absolutely destroying the financial lives of their clients. It was a spectacular systemic violation of both 10b-5 and Section 9A2.
It's pure economic violence. Okay, so Bob gets caught running a pump and dump. But what if Bob doesn't want to mess with sketchy penny stocks?
Yeah.
What if he wants to exploit their clients using perfectly legitimate blue chip stocks like Microsoft or Johnson & Johnson?
That brings us to Bob's second scheme. Churning.
Churning.
Yes, and churning is insidious because it often hides in plain sight. It's defined as excessive trading in a customer's account, controlled by the broker, primarily for the purpose of generating commissions rather than benefiting the customer.
I want to pause here and look at the history because understanding the why requires understanding how brokers historically got paid. For decades, the primary way a broker made a living was by charging a commission fee on every single transaction.
Right.
If the client bought a stock, the broker made $50. If the client sold a stock, the broker made $50.
Exactly. The incentive structure inherently rewarded activity, not necessarily performance. If a client just bought a great stock and held it for 10 years, it was great for the client, but the broker starved.
So broker Bob decides to manufacture activity. Let's say he manages an account for an 80-year-old widow. Her stated investment objective is conservative, long-term capital preservation.
A very standard profile.
Right. But Bob takes her portfolio and starts buying and selling blue chip stocks 50 times a month.
The underlying stocks might be perfectly safe, but the velocity of the trading is destroying the account's value because every single trade bleeds capital through commission fees and bid-ask spreads.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
The portfolio is essentially treading water, or slowly sinking, while Bob is generating thousands of dollars a month in commission revenue.
But here's the critical part for the exam. I want you listening to flag this. The exam will try to trick you by just showing you a high number of trades and asking if it's churning.
Which is a trap.
Right. Churning is not defined merely by a high volume of trades. There are 3 highly specific legal elements that must be present. Let's break them down.
Okay, element number 1. The broker must have control over the account.
What does that look like?
This usually means the client has signed a document granting the broker discretionary authority, allowing the broker to execute trades without asking for permission first. Or it can mean de facto control, where the client is perhaps elderly or financially unsophisticated, and they just blindly rubber stamp every single suggestion the broker makes.
Okay, so if Bob doesn't control the trading decisions, he cannot be convicted of churning.
Exactly.
That makes sense. If the client's the one calling him every hour demanding to trade, Bob is just taking orders. Okay. Element number 2.
Element number 2. The trading must be excessive in light of the customer's specific investment objectives and financial situation.
So it's relative.
Yes, this is the subjective heart of churning. 50 trades a month for an 80-year-old widow who wants conservative growth is unquestionably excessive. But what if the client is a 30-year-old, highly capitalized, aggressive day trader who specifically wants to speculate on daily market volatility?
If that's the stated goal, then 50 trades a month isn't excessive at all. It might actually be exactly what the client hired the firm to do.
Precisely. So the volume of trades must be measured against the specific profile of the investor.
Okay, so control and excessive relative to objectives. And that brings us to the third and final element.
Intent. The broker must act with intent to defraud or with reckless disregard for the customer's interests. This circles right back to the concept of scienter under 10b-5.
Right, the intent.
Bob isn't executing these trades because he genuinely believes it's a brilliant strategy for the widow. He is executing them specifically to extract commission revenue for his own leased sports car.
So if you have control, excessive trading relative to objectives, and intent, if all three are present, it's churning.
You've got it.
Now, before we leave Broker Bob, we have to cover one more of his schemes because this one is heavily tested and frequently confused with insider trading. It is called front running.
Front running is a form of market manipulation that exploits the mechanical realities of how large orders impact market prices. Let's say Broker Bob works at an institutional trading desk. He receives a phone call from a massive mutual fund client.
Okay.
The fund manager says, Bob, we need to buy 1 million shares of XYZ Corporation immediately.
Now let's look at the mechanics of that. If I buy 10 shares of XYZ, the market doesn't even blink. But if an institution dumps a buy order for 1 million shares onto the exchange, what happens to the order book?
It chews through the available liquidity.
Yeah.
The market makers who are supplying the stock have to keep raising their asking price to fulfill an order of that magnitude.
Just basic supply and demand?
Basic supply and demand dictates that a massive influx of buying pressure will drive the price of the stock up, often significantly.
And Bob knows this. He is staring at this massive order ticket, knowing exactly what is going to happen to the price of XYZ stock in about 30 seconds. So what does he do?
Before Bob routes the mutual fund's million-share order to the exchange, he quickly logs into his own personal brokerage account and buys 1,000 shares of XYZ for himself at the current lower price.
He is literally running in front of his customer's order.
Exactly. Once his personal order is filled, he releases the mutual fund's massive order. The million shares hit the tape, the market reacts, and the price of XYZ shoots up by $2 a share.
And then Bob immediately turns around and sells his personal 1,000 shares at the new artificially inflated price.
Pocketing a guaranteed risk-free profit.
That is front running, using the knowledge of a pending massive customer order to benefit yourself. Now, let's do a direct comparison to clarify the exam trap. How is front running legally distinct from insider trading?
It is entirely about the source and nature of the information. In front running, the material non-public information is about an incoming customer trade.
Okay.
In insider trading, the material non-public information is about the internal corporate affairs of the company itself, like an unannounced merger, a failed FDA drug trial, or a massive earnings miss.
So if Bob buys XYZ stock because he knows his client is about to buy 1 million shares, that is front running.
Yes.
But if Bob buys XYZ stock because the CEO secretly told him they are getting acquired by a competitor tomorrow, that is insider trading.
Exactly. Both are highly illegal, but you must know the difference for the exam.
And if you are caught doing either, the consequences are catastrophic. Cue the police sirens. Pull the sports car over, Bob. The SEC and the Department of Justice are here.
It is a perfect time to lock in the penalty numbers. You need to memorize this sequence. 5, 25, 20.
5, 25, 20. Let's break that down.
If Broker Bob is convicted of criminal market manipulation or criminal insider trading, the maximum criminal fine for an individual is up to $5 million.
$5 million.
Okay. If a corporate entity, say, the brokerage firm itself was complicit, the criminal fine scales up to $25 million.
$25 million for the firm.
And the prison sentence. A single count carries up to 20 years in a federal penitentiary.
5, 25, 20. And while Bob is sitting in a holding cell figuring out how to pay $5 million, what is his regulator, FINRA, doing? FINRA
is stripping him of his livelihood. They will issue a permanent bar. And we need to be very clear on terminology here. A suspension has an end date. A bar is permanent.
Like you're out forever.
If you are barred by FINRA, you are excommunicated. You cannot associate with any FINRA member firm in any capacity. You can't even sweep the floors at a brokerage firm. It is total career death.
Which perfectly transitions us, not just as a pivot, but logically, into the absolute epicenter of high-stakes financial crime. We've mentioned it in passing, but let's take a deep dive into Section 3, the domino effect of insider trading and material non-public information.
The term insider trading gets thrown around constantly in the news, but the legal architecture behind it is actually highly specific. The SEC doesn't just prosecute people for knowing secrets.
Right.
They prosecute people for trading on material non-public information, commonly abbreviated as MNPI. To trigger liability, the information must pass 2 distinct legal tests. It must be material, and it must be non-public.
Okay, let's unpack the first test. What exactly elevates a piece of information to the level of material?
The Supreme Court has established that information is material if there is a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor would consider it important in making an investment decision.
So would it move the needle?
Right. Another way to frame it. Would knowing this information significantly alter the total mix of information available to the public?
Give me some concrete examples.
Sure. A pending merger or acquisition is highly material. A massive unannounced shift in corporate earnings. The sudden resignation or indictment of the CEO. A pharmaceutical company realizing their flagship drug just failed clinical trials.
Things that blow up the stock price.
Exactly. These are facts that will violently move the stock price the second the public finds out.
Okay, so if the CEO is just having a turkey sandwich for lunch, that's non-public, but it's not material because nobody cares. The stock price isn't moving based on his deli order.
Right.
So that's the materiality test. Now, what about non-public? That seems pretty straightforward. It just means it hasn't been on the news yet, right?
It is much more complex than that, and this is a massive exam trap. Non-public means the information has not been widely disseminated to the general investing public, A&D. This is the critical part. The market has not had adequate time to absorb and react to the information.
Wait, adequate time to absorb it.
Yes. The exam will give you a scenario to test this exact nuance.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine a publicly traded tech company issues a press release on the PR Newswire at 10:00 a.m. announcing they just secured a massive contract with the Department of Defense. At 10:05 a.m., 5 minutes later, a corporate insider buys 10,000 shares of the stock. Is that insider trading?
Well, logic tells me that if it's on the PR Newswire, it's public. I mean, anyone with an internet connection can read it.
The SEC disagrees.
Really?
The SEC generally holds that 5 minutes is not sufficient time for the broader market to digest the news, analyze its financial impact, and adjust the price of the stock. While the information is technically published, it is still legally considered non-public for trading purposes until the market absorbs it.
So how long do you have to wait?
Generally, regulators expect insiders to wait at least one full trading day, sometimes two, after a major announcement before executing trades. If you trade 5 minutes after the press release, you are trading on MNPI and you are going to federal court.
That is fascinating. Publication does not equal instant absorption. Okay, let's look at how this information actually travels, because it rarely stays confined to the boardroom.
Yeah.
Let's introduce two new characters, Corporate Carl and Neighbor Nancy.
Corporate Carl. So he is the chief financial officer of a publicly traded biomedical company. He is a true classic insider. He owes a direct fiduciary duty of trust and confidence to his company and to the company's shareholders.
And as the CFO, Carl knows that next Tuesday, the company is going to announce that their new cancer drug was rejected by the FDA. The stock is going to plummet. If Carl logs into his E-Trade account and sells all his shares on Friday to avoid the crash, he is dead to rights. Direct insider trading.
Exactly. But let's say Carl is smarter than that. He knows the SEC monitors executive trading accounts, so Carl doesn't trade. Instead, Carl hosts a neighborhood barbecue over the weekend.
Ah, the barbecue.
Right. He's stressed, he has a few too many drinks, and he leans over the fence and tells his neighbor Nancy. He says, "Nancy, I know you own our stock. Keep this completely quiet, but the FDA rejected our drug. Get out on Monday."
Carl has just initiated the domino effect. He's become a tipper.
Yes. And let's say Nancy, hearing this, immediately logs into her account on Monday morning and sells her entire position before the terrible news breaks on Tuesday. Nancy is now the tippee.
So who is legally liable? The guy who spilled the secret or the woman who actually pushed the sell button?
They're both liable.
Both of them.
The chain of liability follows the flow of the material non-public information. Nancy, the tippee, is liable because she knew, or reasonably should have known, that the information was confidential and that Carl was breaching his fiduciary duty by sharing it. She traded on an unfair informational advantage.
Okay, listeners, I have a direct question for you. Let's change the scenario slightly to test the boundary of a law. Listen carefully. Carl leans over the fence of the BBQ and tells Nancy the massive secret about the FDA rejection. Nancy hears it. She gasps. She thinks, I need to sell my stock first thing Monday. But then her kid breaks his arm. She spends Monday at the hospital, completely detracted, and she never actually logs in to sell the stock. On Tuesday, the news breaks, and her stock value collapses. Is Nancy liable for insider trading? I'll give you a beat.
The answer is no. Nancy is not liable.
Why not? She possessed the exact same illegal secret.
Because merely possessing material non-public information is not a crime. The violation occurs when you act on it.
The action.
A tippee is only liable if they actually execute a transaction based on the information, or if they turn around and tip someone else who trades. Since Nancy's stock simply tanked with the rest of the public, she committed no violation.
That is a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Action is required. But what about Carl? I mean, he spilled the beans. Does he get off the hook just because Nancy's kid broke his arm?
Well, if Nancy doesn't trade, and nobody else down the chain trades, Carl technically might dodge an insider trading conviction, though he'd likely be fired for breaching confidentiality.
Yeah.
The exact second anyone down the chain trades, let's say Nancy told her brother, and the brother traded Carl, is instantly liable as the original tipper. And here's the fascinating legal standard for tipper liability. To be prosecuted, Carl must have received a personal benefit for sharing the information.
Wait, a personal benefit? Did Nancy pay him a bribe for the tip?
She doesn't have to. The Supreme Court has interpreted personal benefit incredibly broadly. It doesn't require a suitcase full of cash. Just the act of giving a gift of information to a trading relative or friend is enough.
So just being the cool guy at the barbecue.
Exactly. Carl wanting to look like a big shot at a barbecue or wanting to maintain a good relationship with his neighbor satisfies the personal benefit requirement.
So Carl risks 20 years in prison just to seem important to his neighbor. The psychology of that is wild. And let's talk about how the SEC actually catches these people, because earlier we promised to look at the mechanics. How does the government know Nancy sold her stock based on a BBQ conversation?
It comes down to big data. The SEC utilizes sophisticated surveillance algorithms, specifically through systems like the Consolidated Audit Trail, or CAT. This system tracks every single order, cancellation, and execution across all U.S. equities and options markets.
Wow.
So when a massive news event happens, like the FDA drug rejection, the algorithms immediately run backward in time. They look for highly profitable, anomalous trades made in the days leading up to the announcement.
So the algorithm flags Nancy's account because she suddenly sold her entire position the day before the crash.
Exactly. Then the SEC investigators pull Nancy's profile. They cross-reference her address, her phone records, and her social networks. They see she lives next door to Carl, the CFO of the company. The connection is made, the subpoenas are issued, and the dominoes fall.
Just like that.
This isn't theoretical. This is exactly how the SEC unwound the massive Galleon Group insider trading case with hedge fund manager Raj Radratnam. They mapped the network of expert consultants and corporate insiders who were leaking tips, flagged the anomalous trades, and used wiretaps to prove the flow of information.
It's a digital dragnet. Now let's talk about the financial devastation of getting caught. We covered the criminal penalties, but the civil penalties imposed by the SEC are just as terrifying. They operate under the Insider Trading Sanctions Act of 1984, known as ITSA.
Right, and ITSA introduced a concept designed to utterly destroy the financial incentive of insider trading. It's called treble damages.
Treble meaning triple, 3 times. Let's walk through the exact math of a treble damage calculation because it is ruinous. Let's say Nancy DD trade. Let's say instead of selling to avoid a loss, she bought call options before a massive positive announcement, and she made a crisp $100,000 illegal profit.
Okay, so Nancy's up 100 grand. The SEC finishes their investigation and brings civil charges. The very first thing they demand is disgorgement.
Disgorgement. It sounds like a biological reaction.
It basically is. It means vomiting up the ill-gotten gains. Nancy has to physically hand back the entire $100,000 she made from the illegal trade. She is now back to square one, mathematically at zero.
Okay, but the pain is just starting.
Oh, yeah, because disgorgement isn't a penalty. It's just returning stolen money.
Right.
Under ITSA, the SEC can now petition the court to slap Nancy with a civil penalty of up to 3 times the amount of the profit gained or loss avoided.
So 3 times the $100,000 profit is a $300,000 penalty.
Correct. So Nancy first disgorges the $100K, taking her back to zero. Then she has to write a check to the government for $300,000 out of her own pre-existing savings. Her total out-of-pocket financial cost for this crime is $400,000.
$100,000 profit turns into a $400,000 total loss. That is why they do it. It has to be ruinous to act as a deterrent. But this brings up a massive logical paradox.
What's that?
If the surveillance algorithms are so good and the penalties are so devastating, how does any CEO, CFO, or board member ever legally buy or sell shares in their own company? They always possess material non-public information. They know the quarterly earnings weeks before the public does.
That is a fundamental regulatory challenge. If executives couldn't trade, they wouldn't accept stock options as compensation, which aligns their interests with shareholders. To solve this, the SEC created an affirmative defense, Rule 10b-51 trading plans.
How does a 10b5-1 plan actually protect an executive?
A 10b-51 plan is a prearranged, legally binding, written contract that an insider sets up with their broker to buy or sell stock at predetermined times or prices in the future. The critical, absolute requirement is that the insider must create this plan during a clean window, a period when they absolutely do not possess any material non-public information.
So Carl, months before the drug trials even start, tells his broker, I want to sell 1,000 shares of my stock on the 15th of every single month for the next 2 years to pay for my kids' college.
Exactly. The broker executes the trades on autopilot. If the 15th of the month rolls around and Carl happens to secretly know the company's about to go bankrupt, the broker still executes the sale. Because the decision to trade was made months prior, when Carl was legally clean, it is not considered insider trading.
It's like a blind trust mechanism. But hasn't there been a lot of controversy about these plans recently?
Yes, there has been massive scrutiny. The loophole historically was that executives could legally cancel a 10b5-1 plan at any time, even if they had inside information.
Oh, wow.
So if an executive knew bad news was coming, they would let the automated sales trigger. But if they knew a massive positive announcement was coming, they would just cancel their automated sales to hold on to the stock for the bump.
That feels like cheating.
The SEC thought so too. They recently tightened the rules significantly, adding mandatory cooling-off periods between when a plan is adopted and when the first trade can occur, specifically to stop executives from gaming the system.
It's a constant arms race between regulators and insiders. Now, there is one more structural defense we need to cover, especially concerning massive Wall Street institutions. It's called the information barrier, historically known as a Chinese wall.
The information barrier is the physical, electronic, and procedural blockade designed to prevent the flow of material, non-public information between different departments of a large financial firm.
Give me the physical layout of how this works.
Okay, imagine a massive global investment bank. On the 40th floor, you have the investment banking division. These bankers are structuring a secret $30 billion merger between two massive tech companies. They possess the ultimate material non-public information. If that secret leaks, fortunes could be made in seconds.
And on the 20th floor of the exact same building, you have the firm's proprietary trading desk buying and selling tech stocks all day long. If the 40th floor talks to the 20th floor, it is a catastrophic insider trading violation.
Precisely. So the firm must build impenetrable walls. And I mean that literally and digitally. The key cards for the 40th floor will not open the doors on the 20th floor. The computer servers are entirely segregated
To keep the data apart.
But more importantly, modern compliance departments use algorithmic surveillance to monitor all internal communications. If an investment banker emails a trader, compliance immediately intercepts and flags it.
And what happens if the wall breaks? What if a banker goes down to the lobby, gets a coffee with a trader, and slips him the merger details?
The individual employees are prosecuted, of course. But the massive danger is to the firm itself. If the SEC determines that the brokerage firm failed to establish, maintain, or enforce adequate information barriers, the firm can be held liable as a controlling person.
Controlling person liability.
Right. And the penalty for a controlling person failing to prevent insider trading is the greater of $1 million or up to 3 times the profit gained or loss avoided by the illegal trades.
A failure of the system costs the firm millions.
Okay, we have covered stealing information from the broader market. We are now going to shift our focus inward. What happens when the victim isn't a faceless market participant, but the actual client sitting right across the desk from the broker? This brings us to Section 4, crossing the line with client money. This area of regulation moves away from systemic market risks and focuses entirely on the fiduciary duty owed to the individual retail investor. We are talking about the strict rules preventing financial professionals from exploiting their direct access to client capital.
Let's start with a scenario that probably happens thousands of times a day in various industries, but is highly toxic in finance. A broker and a client have worked together for 7 years. They trust each other. They grab lunch once a month. The broker hits a sudden, unexpected rough patch, maybe a massive medical bill, and he asks the client, hey, I'm in a tight spot. Can I borrow $10,000? I will pay you back in 6 weeks with 10% interest.
The regulatory stance on this is unforgiving. FINRA strictly prohibits registered persons from borrowing money from or lending money to their customers?
No exceptions.
It is viewed as a massive inherent conflict of interest. The broker is supposed to be objectively advising the client on how to grow their wealth, not utilizing the client as a personal ATM. It shatters the fiduciary dynamic.
But there have to be exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
When is borrowing legally permissible?
There are highly specific, narrow exceptions, and almost all of them require prior written approval from the member firm's compliance department. You can borrow from a customer if the customer is a member of your immediate family.
Okay, family is fine.
You can borrow if the customer is a lending institution acting in its normal course of business, meaning if your client is literally Chase Bank, you can get a standard mortgage from them.
That makes sense. What about personal relationships?
You can borrow if there is a pre-existing personal or business relationship outside of the broker-customer relationship.
Okay, let's pause and shine a massive spotlight on the word pre-existing, because this is crime exam trap territory. How does FINRA define pre-existing?
It is entirely chronological. Pre-existing means a relationship must have demonstrably existed before the individual ever opened a brokerage account with you.
Give me the contrast.
If you served in the military with a guy for 4 years, you are lifelong friends, and 10 years later, he opens an IRA with you, that is a pre-existing personal relationship. Under FINRA rules, you could potentially borrow money from him, provided your firm approves it in writing.
Right.
But if a complete stranger walks into your office, opens an account, and over the next 5 years you become best friends, you play golf every weekend, you attend each other's weddings, that does not count as a pre-existing relationship.
Because it started as business.
The friendship was born out of the commercial business relationship. You cannot legally borrow a dime from them.
That is such a crucial, testable distinction. The timeline of the friendship is everything. Okay, what about sharing in a customer's account? Let's say a broker tells a client, I have a phenomenal stock pick, but it's volatile. Let's open a joint account. I'll put in 20% of the capital, you put in 80%, and we will split the profits 50-50.
Absolutely illegal. A registered rep can only share in the profits and losses of a customer account if 3 strict conditions are met. First, the customer must provide written authorization. Second, the member firm must provide written authorization. Third, and this is the mathematical kicker, the sharing of profits and losses must be strictly proportionate to the financial contributions made by each party.
Proportionate sharing, meaning if I only contribute 20% of the cash to the joint account, I am legally capped at taking exactly 20% of the profits. I cannot take 50% no matter what the client agrees to.
Correct. Regulators do not want brokers utilizing client capital to leverage their own outsized returns. The only exception to the proportionate sharing rule is if the joint account is with an immediate family member.
Family again.
If you open a joint account with your mother and she agrees, you can put in 5% of the money and take 90% of the profits, assuming firm approval. But for non-family clients, the math must be strictly proportionate.
Let's transition to a specific demographic of clients that FINRA have built specialized protections for. Let's introduce Senior Sam.
A very relevant scenario given the massive demographic shift of retiring baby boomers. Senior Sam is 78 years old. He has been a loyal client of the firm for 2 decades. He has a highly funded retirement account. But recently, the broker has noticed Sam is becoming forgetful. He's confused about statements, and suddenly, Sam starts bringing a new individual to his financial reviews. Let's call her caregiver Kathy.
Caregiver Kathy is aggressive. She isolates Sam. She answers questions on his behalf. And one day, Kathy calls the broker and says, Sam wants to immediately wire $300,000 to an offshore account in the Bahamas to invest in a timeshare project I'm running.
Every single compliance alarm in the building should be ringing. This scenario is exactly why FINRA implemented Rule 2165, which addresses the financial exploitation of specified adults. This rule empowers brokerage firms to step in and stop the bleeding when they suspect elder abuse.
Before we detail the mechanism, let's define the target. Who exactly is a specified adult under Rule 2165?
Exam trap alert right here. The term specified adult is much broader than just seniors. It includes any natural person age 65 or older, but it also includes any person age 18 or older who has a mental or physical impairment that renders them unable to protect their own interests.
Wait, so a 25-year-old client who suffers a severe traumatic brain injury in a car accident is granted the exact same regulatory protection under this rule as 78-year-old Sam.
Exactly, age 65 and up, or 18 and up with a documented impairment. Now, if the brokerage firm reasonably suspects that caregiver Kathy is exploiting Sam, meaning she's deceiving, coercing, or defrauding him to extract his assets, the firm is granted a powerful tool. They can place a temporary hold on the account.
What exactly does the hold cover?
Originally, the rule only allowed firms to hold disbursements, meaning money physically leaving the account, like a wire transfer or a mailed check. But FINRA recently expanded the rule to also cover securities transactions.
So the firm can block Kathy from wiring the cash. AED, they can block her from liquidating Sam's portfolio of stable dividend stocks to generate the cash in the first place.
Exactly.
How long can the firm freeze Sam's account? They can't just lock up his life savings indefinitely based on a suspicion, right?
No, the timeline is highly regulated. The initial temporary hold can last for up to 15 business days. During this period, the firm's compliance and legal teams must conduct a rapid internal review of the facts. If their investigation supports the suspicion of ongoing exploitation, they are legally permitted to extend the hold for an additional 15 business days.
So that is a maximum total hold of 30 business days, 15 initial, plus an extension of 15.
Correct. And be careful on the exam. They might try to trick you by phrasing it as 15 days plus an additional 30 days, making it 45 days total. That is incorrect. It is 15 days, extendable to a maximum of 30 days total.
Okay, while the money is frozen and the firm is investigating, who do they have to legally notify?
The firm must notify all parties authorized to transact on the account. They must notify Sam himself, and they must notify Sam's trusted contact person no later than 2 business days after placing the hold.
Now, let's apply some logic here. What if caregiver Kathy is legally authorized to transact on the account because she bullied Sam into signing a power of attorney? Does the firm have to call Kathy and tell her they froze the money?
Think about the why behind the rule. What happens if the firm calls the suspected thief and says, "We froze the wire transfer because we think you are stealing from Sam"?
Kathy panics. She knows she's caught. She might immediately take Sam to his local retail bank and drain his checking account, or she might physically isolate him further or start shredding documents. Tipping her off accelerates the abuse.
Exactly, which is why the rule explicitly permits the firm to delay or completely withhold notification to a specific party if the firm reasonably suspects that specific party is the one engaged in the exploitation. The rule is designed to protect the investigation and ultimately to protect Sam.
That is brilliant regulatory design. Now, you mentioned notifying a trusted contact person. What is that? Is that just another term for a power of attorney?
Direct comparison time. The exam loves to test the difference between a trusted contact person and a power of attorney. Under FINRA Rule 4512, firms are required to make reasonable efforts to ask every customer to provide the name and contact information of a trusted contact person who must be at least 18 years old.
But what authority does this person actually have?
None. Zero legal authority. A power of attorney, a POA, is a legal document that grants an individual the actual authority to execute trades, wire money, and make binding financial decisions on behalf of the client.
Right.
A trusted contact person cannot execute a single trade. They cannot move a single dollar. They are essentially an emergency contact. They are a resource for the firm to call if they suspect Sam is being exploited, or if Sam suddenly goes incommunicado due to a health crisis, to verify his well-being.
It's exactly like putting down your sister as an emergency contact at your gym. If you faint on the treadmill, the gym calls your sister to come get you. But your sister cannot call the gym and cancel your membership or buy personal training sessions on your credit card.
Perfect analogy. And while the firm must make reasonable efforts to obtain a trusted contact person during account opening, the customer is not legally required to provide one. If Sam refuses to name someone, the firm can still open the account.
Okay, let's keep this narrative going. Caregiver Kathy realizes the wire transfer is blocked. She is desperate for cash, so she tries to forge Sam's signature on a paper check. Or let's look at broker Bob. Bob is desperate to get an options agreement finalized before the market closes, and the client is unreachable. So Bob decides to just scribble the client's signature on the form himself. This brings us to Section 5, the paper trail books, records, and investigations.
The integrity of books and records is the absolute bedrock of securities regulation. If the SEC or M1 Corps cannot implicitly trust the physical and digital documents a firm produces, the entire regulatory oversight system collapses. It becomes a lawless environment. Therefore, any tampering with records is prosecuted aggressively.
Let's start with signatures, because this is where a lot of well-meaning brokers get their careers destroyed. What is a signature of convenience?
A signature of convenience is when a registered rep signs a customer's name to a document simply to expedite a process, save time, or avoid bothering the client. Let's say Bob has a client who is on a golfing vacation in Scotland. Bob needs an updated account form signed today to execute a crucial strategy. Bob calls the client on the golf course. The client says, "Bob, I trust you completely. I'm on the 9th hole. Just sign the form for me. You have my full, explicit, verbal permission. Get it done."
The client gave direct verbal permission. Bob isn't trying to steal anything. He's literally following the client's orders.
Exam trap alert. Oral permission to sign a document is never, under any circumstances, a valid defense. Regulators require authenticated wet signatures or heavily encrypted digital signatures. If you take a pen and sign another human being's name to a financial document, it is forgery, period. It destroys the evidentiary value of the document.
But what if Bob has a full written power of attorney for that client? The client legally granted Bob the right to sign documents.
Even with a power of attorney, you never physically forge the client's name. If Bob has a POA, Bob signs his own name, Robert Smith, and writes as agent for or acting as POA for the client. You never simulate another person's signature.
That is crystal clear. Do not forge names. But what about altering the actual data on the documents? Let's say Bob has a client who earns $40,000 a year. The client wants to trade highly speculative naked options. Bob knows his firm's compliance algorithm will instantly reject this account because the client doesn't have the income to sustain the massive potential losses. It's an unsuitable strategy. So, to force the approval through, Bob goes into the computer and changes the client's stated income from $40,000 to $250,000.
Bob has just initiated a cascading series of violations, and this is highly testable. The exam will give you this exact scenario and ask you to categorize the violation. Is Bob guilty of making an unsuitable recommendation, or is he guilty of a books and records violation?
Logically, he's doing both.
Exactly, and he will be charged separately for both. Recommending naked options to a low-income client is a severe violation of the FINRA Suitability Rule. The physical act of altering the account document to hide that unsuitability is a separate, distinct violation of the Books and Records Rule. Bob gets hit with a double penalty.
He is corrupting the database. And FINRA relies on that database.
Let's talk about how FINRA investigates this. Let's say the algorithmic surveillance flags Bob's accounts because too many of his clients suddenly have incomes of exactly $250,000. FINRA sends Bob a formal letter of inquiry. They say, "Bob, we need you to produce all email correspondence regarding these 10 accounts, and we need you to appear at our regional office for an on-the-record interview next Tuesday."
When a broker receives a FINRA request for information, panic usually sets in. And panic leads to catastrophic decision-making.
Like shredding documents.
Yes. If Bob starts deleting emails or shredding physical files before the mandatory regulatory retention period expires, which is typically 3 or 6 years depending on the document type, he elevates a simple regulatory inquiry into active obstruction. But the most common, tragic mistake brokers make is simply ghosting FINRA.
They just ignore the letter, hoping FINRA forgets about them. Exactly, they bury their head in the sand. But FINRA Rule 8210 requires all members and associated persons to fully and promptly cooperate with any investigation. If you ignore a request for information, FINRA doesn't just send a polite follow-up. They issue a suspension. You are legally suspended from acting in any registered capacity.
And what if Bob continues to ignore them while he's suspended?
This is a critical timeline you must know for the exam, the 90-day clock. If a registered person is suspended for failing to respond to a FINRA request for information or failing to appear for testimony, they have exactly 90 days from the day of the suspension to comply. If they do not produce the documents or sit for the interview within those 90 days, the temporary suspension automatically permanently converts into a bar from the industry.
Career death by avoidance.
It is staggering how often this happens. Over 1/3 of all FINRA enforcement cases that result in a permanent industry bar are simply individuals who failed to respond to a request for information. Often, the underlying issue FINRA was investigating was a small administrative error. But because the broker panicked and ignored the letters for 90 days, they lost their career forever.
The lesson is, if FINRA knocks, you open the door and hand them the files. Period. Okay, let's shift gears. What if our broker isn't actively stealing? He isn't forging documents. He's genuinely trying to be a hardworking, honest guy, but he just wants to make a few extra bucks outside of his main job. This brings us to Section 6, the side hustles. Outside business activities versus private securities transactions.
Financial professionals are typically highly driven entrepreneurial individuals. It is incredibly common for them to have side ventures. But because of the potential for conflicts of interest, FINRA heavily regulates how these side ventures interface with the brokerage firm.
Let's introduce our final character, Moonlighting Mike. Mike is a registered rep. He works his tail off from 9 to 5, building his book of business. But on the weekends, Mike wants to utilize his sales skills to sell residential real estate. He gets his real estate license and wants to start showing houses. What is Mike's regulatory obligation?
Real estate is not a security. Therefore, Mike's side hustle falls under FINRA Rule 3270, which governs outside business activities, commonly referred to as OBAs. The rule here is relatively straightforward, but strict on timing. Mike must provide prior written notice to his member firm before he engages in the activity.
Prior written notice. He can't sell a house on Saturday, collect a commission check, and then tell his compliance officer on Monday morning.
Correct. The notice must precede the activity. Once Mike submits the written notice, the firm's compliance department reviews it. They are looking for conflicts. They ask, will selling houses distract Mike from his duties here? Will he try to cross-sell real estate to his brokerage clients in a way that creates a conflict of interest? The firm possesses the ultimate authority to approve the activity, place restrictions on it, or prohibit it entirely. But Mike's regulatory duty is fulfilled the moment he provides that prior written notice.
Okay, that makes sense for real estate.
Yeah.
But what if Mike's side hustle is directly related to finance? Let's say Mike has an old college roommate who is launching a revolutionary artificial intelligence startup in a garage. The roommate says, Mike, you manage money for wealthy clients. If you can help me privately sell equity shares of my startup to your clients, I will pay you a 10% finder's fee on whatever you raise.
Now we have crossed a massive regulatory boundary. We are no longer dealing with an OBA under Rule 3270. Because Mike is facilitating the sale of actual stock in a startup, he is engaging in a private securities transaction, or PST, governed by FINRA Rule 3280. A PST is any securities transaction executed outside the regular course or scope of an associated person's employment with their member firm.
Mike is essentially doing a Wall Street deal off the books.
Exactly. And because it involves securities, the rules are significantly more stringent. Mike still must provide prior written notice to his firm, detailing the proposed transaction and his specific role in it. But the exam trap here hinges entirely on one specific concept, compensation. What the firm is legally required to do next depends completely on whether Mike is getting paid.
Okay, let's walk through the logic. In our scenario, Mike is getting a 10% finder's fee. He's receiving compensation. What must the firm do?
If Mike receives or expects to receive selling compensation for the private transaction, simple acknowledgement from the firm is utterly insufficient. The firm must affirmatively approve the transaction in writing. If they approve it, they must then record the transaction on their own books and records, and they must supervise Mike's participation in the deal as if the firm itself were executing the transaction.
Wow. If Mike gets paid, the firm is forced to adopt the transaction as their own. They take on all the legal and regulatory liability for the startup deal.
Precisely. They have to run it through their own due diligence, ensure suitability for the clients, and monitor the entire process. Now, let's flip the scenario. What if Mike says, I don't want a fee, I'm just doing my college buddy a favor, and I genuinely think this AI startup is a brilliant investment for my clients. Zero compensation.
If there is no compensation, does the firm still have to adopt the deal?
No. If there is absolutely no selling compensation involved, the firm simply has to acknowledge receipt of Mike's written notice. The firm may, at its discretion, require Mike to adhere to specific conditions, but they are not legally mandated to record the transaction on their books or actively supervise it. Compensation is a definitive trigger for mandatory firm supervision.
That is a phenomenal heuristic for the exam. Let me summarize it to lock it in. OBA, non-securities like real estate. Just give prior written notice. PST, securities with zero compensation. Give notice, firm acknowledges. PST, securities with compensation. Give notice, firm must explicitly approve any fully supervised.
A perfect operational summary. Now let's look at the dark side of this. What if Mike looks at all that mandatory compliance paperwork, realizes his firm will probably reject the highly speculative AI startup deal, and decides to just facilitate the investments in secret? He hooks his clients up with his college buddy, collects the fee, and never tells his firm.
I know there is a specific, highly tested industry term for this.
There is. It is called selling away. Executing private securities transactions without providing notice to and receiving approval from the member firm is considered one of the cardinal sins of the brokerage industry.
Let me play devil's advocate. Why is FINRA Rule so aggressive about selling away? If Mike introduces a client to the startup goes public, and the client makes a 500% return, everyone is thrilled. Who is the victim?
The regulatory framework doesn't judge the rule by the outcome of a single lucky trade. It judges the rule by the systemic risk it creates. The entire logic behind selling away prohibitions is investor protection. When a retail investor opens an account at a major regulated brokerage firm, they operate under the assumption that the firm's massive compliance department, their team of lawyers, and their due diligence analysts are vetting the products being offered.
They believe there's a safety net.
Exactly. When Mike sells away, he actively strips the client of that entire institutional safety net. He exposes the client to an unvetted, unsupervised asset. History is littered with brokers who sold away to put clients into what turned out to be massive Ponzi schemes or fraudulent real estate syndications. Even if Mike's specific AI deal makes money, Mike has fundamentally violated FINRA rules by denying his clients the regulatory oversight they are entitled to.
That makes the why incredibly clear. Selling away is stripping the client of their armor.
Okay.
We have covered private, unregulated startups. Let's move to the exact opposite end of the spectrum. What happens when a company steps into the brightest spotlight in finance and goes public? We're moving into our final segment, Section 7, the VIP line and IPO restrictions.
When a highly anticipated, fundamentally strong company executes an initial public offering, an IPO, the market demand for those initial shares often vastly outstrips the available supply. Everyone wants to buy in at the official offering price because history shows that hot IPOs often pop or surge in value the moment they begin trading on the open exchange. FINRA Rule 5130 was written specifically to prevent industry insiders from hoarding these guaranteed windfalls for themselves.
I like to think of this using a real-world analogy outside of finance. Think about the concert ticket industry. Imagine Taylor Swift is coming to play a massive stadium in your city. The face value of the tickets is $100. But imagine if the venue staff, the concert promoters, the sound engineers, and the employees of the ticketing website secretly colluded to buy up 90% of the tickets for themselves before the public sale ever opened.
They buy them at face value, wait for the concert to sell out in seconds, and then immediately flip them on the secondary market to the actual fans for $1,000 each.
Exactly. The general public never even had a fair shot at the face value price. That is exactly what FINRA is trying to prevent in the equity markets. The purpose of an IPO is to raise capital from the public. Industry insiders should not be allowed to use their privileged position to capture the IPO pop at the public's expense. Rule 5130 restricts certain persons from purchasing shares of a new issue, an IPO, at the offering price. So who exactly is on this restricted VIP list? Who is legally banned from buying at the IPO offering price?
The primary restricted persons are the insiders themselves, FINRA member firms and their associated registered personnel, basically anyone working in the brokerage industry. It also includes finders and fiduciaries acting on behalf of the managing underwriter. This means the specialized lawyers, accountants, and consultants working directly on the IPO deal. It also includes portfolio managers buying for their own personal accounts.
That makes logical sense. Keep the actual Wall Street insiders out of the initial allocation. But what about their families? If broker Bob knows he can't buy the hot new tech IPO, could he just transfer cash to his wife's account and have her buy it?
No, and this is where the exam will rigorously test your knowledge. The restriction inherently extends to the immediate family members of associated persons. And FINRA defines immediate family very broadly for the purposes of this rule.
How broadly? Give me the list.
Immediate family includes your spouse, your children, your parents, your siblings, and your in-laws. Mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law.
Wait, hold on. I can understand my spouse being restricted, our finances are combined, but my mother-in-law is legally banned from buying an IPO simply because I chose to work at a brokerage firm.
Yes. Regulators assume that the financial bonds within extended families are tight enough that a broker could easily use an in-law as a straw buyer to capture the IPO profits indirectly. The exam loves to test this specific boundary. They will give you a scenario where a registered rep's sister-in-law wants to buy an IPO at the offering price, and the correct answer is absolutely not. She is a restricted person.
That is wild. But I understand the anti-loophole logic. But let me clarify a crucial detail. You keep emphasizing the phrase at the offering price. What happens the next day? Once the underwriter releases the stock and it starts actively trading on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, is my mother-in-law still banned from buying it?
Absolutely not. Exam trap alert. The restriction applies only to the primary market, the initial allocation of shares at the specific offering price. The precise millisecond that the stock hits the secondary market and begins trading publicly, the restriction vanishes. Any restricted person, the broker, the lawyers, the in-laws, can buy as much of the stock as they want in the open market at the prevailing market price. The rule solely protects the integrity of the initial face value allocation.
That is a critical distinction to remember. The primary market is restricted. The secondary market is a free-for-all. Okay, is there any structural exception to this rule? What if my restricted mother-in-law doesn't want to buy the IPO directly, but she is a member of a neighborhood investment club, and the club as an entity wants to buy the IPO? Does her mere presence in the club poison the well for everyone else?
This brings us to the final technical mechanism of the episode, the de minimis exception. FINRA recognizes that pooled investment vehicles like investment clubs, hedge funds, or family offices might inadvertently contain restricted persons. The rule states that an account can purchase IPO shares even if a restricted person is a participant in that account, provided that the restricted person's beneficial interest in the account does not exceed 10%.
10%. The de minimis threshold.
Exactly. So if your mother-in-law's capital only accounts for 5% of the total assets in the neighborhood investment club, the club is cleared to purchase the IPO. Her interest is considered de minimis, or too small to matter. However, if she owns 15% of the club, the entire entity is barred from the IPO allocation.
10% is the magic number. I'm locking that in. Okay, take a deep breath. We have covered a staggering amount of regulatory ground today. We started with receptionist Rachel at the front desk, navigated the boiler rooms with broker Bob, traced the dominoes of insider trading with corporate Carl, protected senior Sam, and ended up at the IPO allocations. We're at the end of the line, which means it is time for the rapid-fire recap.
Let's do it. Let's synthesize this into actionable, testable bullet points for the exam.
First up, the anti-fraud nets. SEC Rule 10b-5 is the duct tape. It catches broadly any fraud, omission, or deceit in securities, provided there is scienter or intent. Section 9A2 is the laser scalpel. It strictly prohibits the mechanical manipulation of trading activity and prices, like wash trades or matched orders.
Next, distinguish the specific manipulative schemes. Front-running is trading ahead of a known pending customer block order. Insider trading is trading based on a corporate secret, formerly known as material non-public information. Churning requires 3 elements: broker control, excessive trading relative to the client's objectives, and intent to defraud.
Penalties for market manipulation and insider trading. 5, 25, 20. $5 million maximum fine for individuals, $25 million for corporate entities, and up to 20 years in federal prison.
For civil insider trading penalties brought by the SEC, remember the Insider Trading Sanctions Act, or ITSA. It allows for treble damages. The violator must disgorge the illegal profits, returning them to zero, and then pay an additional penalty of up to 3 times the profit gained.
Protecting clients. You generally cannot borrow from or lend to clients unless there is a pre-existing relationship that predates the account opening. For joint accounts with non-family members, profit sharing must be strictly proportionate to capital contributions.
FINRA Rule 2165 for specified adults. A specified adult is anyone age 65 and older, or anyone 18 and older with a mental or physical impairment. If financial exploitation is reasonably suspected, the firm can place a temporary hold on disbursements and securities transactions for 15 business days, which can be extended to a maximum of 30 total business days.
Books and records. Signatures of convenience are always illegal. Verbal permission is not a defense. If FINRA sends a request for information, you must respond. A suspension for failing to respond converts into a permanent industry bar after exactly 90 days.
Side hustles. Rule 3270 outside business activities like selling real estate require prior written notice to the firm. Rule 3280 private securities transactions with compensation like selling startup shares for a fee require prior written notice. PLUS, the firm must actively approve and supervise the transaction. Executing private deals without telling the firm is called selling away.
Finally, IPOs under Rule 5130. Industry insiders and their extended immediate family, including in-laws, are restricted from buying an IPO at the initial offering price. They can buy in the secondary market immediately. The exception is if they participate in an account where restricted persons hold 10% or less of the beneficial interest, the de minimis exception.
An excellent, comprehensive recap. And before we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. Something to mull over as you transition from studying for an exam to actually operating in the modern financial industry. We spent a lot of time discussing material non-public information, and I highlighted that a press release takes time to be absorbed by the market. But think about the technological reality we live in today.
We live in an era of algorithmic high-frequency trading and instantaneous global social media platforms.
Exactly. The line defining what constitutes market absorption is blurring at light speed. Imagine a CEO accidentally tweets a massive earnings miss from his personal account, realizes his mistake, and deletes it 3 seconds later. How many milliseconds does it take for a scraping algorithm to read that tweet, comprehend the sentiment, and execute a multi-million-dollar short position before human eyes even process the text? Was that information widely disseminated? Did the market absorb it?
It's a regulatory nightmare. The laws were written for ticker tapes and newspapers, not microsecond data feeds.
Precisely. As a future financial professional, you won't just be memorizing these rules to pass a test. You are going to be navigating them in real time, in a market where technology is constantly outpacing the legal framework. Understanding the core principles of fairness, transparency, and fiduciary duty is the only way to survive when the specific mechanics of the market change.
That is an incredible point to end on. Know the why, and you can navigate the gray areas. You'll know how to protect your clients, protect the market, and avoid the devastating penalties we talked about today. Stay out of the muddy waters, trust the frameworks we built, and you are going to crush this exam.
Absolutely. Study the mechanics, trust your preparation, and we'll see you on the other side.